Second thing is keeping Drake Maye in the pocket. And when we talked about it yesterday, he's at 16.1% of the time he's being sacked, which is the second highest going into a Super Bowl in the history of the NFL next to Roger Staubach. So you can't allow him to answer that problem with his feet. So part of that is going to be keeping him in the pocket and making sure that you're not giving him run lanes so that the pressure which is going to come, he then answers with an 8-yard gain, a 10-yard gain, a 12-yard gain, and he's been very effective with his feet, and I imagine that's going to be the early answer for him, especially with the pressure of the moment. So that's a second component.
I'm genuinely pleased that Manini brought that up, because it's precisely the point I've been attempting to convey. Regarding the entirety of the Super Bowl analysis surrounding this contest, the fundamental premise for a New England Patriots victory hinges upon their capacity to unsettle the Seattle Seahawks. This contest isn't merely about the Patriots executing their optimal brand of football. It is, more critically, about compelling the Seahawks to deviate from their peak performance. This might sound somewhat simplistic to articulate, yet it isn't a universal truth for every matchup. There are instances where the sole objective is to simply play our most flawless version of the game, and that constitutes the primary emphasis. On other occasions, the strategy is far more centered on discombobulating the opposition. My two principal methodologies for achieving this disruption are as follows. The first is Drake Maye and his mobility. Drake Maye's capacity as a runner. The idea is to avoid letting him remain static within the pocket. If he can effectively utilize his legs, it imposes a set of circumstances upon Seattle that is fundamentally antithetical to their desires. It unlocks the entire offensive playbook. This isn't simply a case of having Drake Maye sit back and unleash throws downfield, though, to be clear, that will be a component. The prevailing narrative has been overwhelmingly fixated on the vertical passing game, discussing his arm strength, his accuracy on deep attempts, all those related topics. And I contend that is not the primary avenue to success in this particular clash. Don't misinterpret me. If the New England Patriots are to emerge victorious, those deep shots will undoubtedly form a part of the tapestry. He is the quarterback, after all, an elite one. But the mechanism for genuinely disrupting this specific defense, from my perspective, is through Drake Maye's rushing ability. It will manifest in specific plays. I even joked about this when analyzing it in my Seahawks film review, predicting the broadcast commentary will inevitably say something like, "Wow, look at this Seahawks defense now. They've got their hands on their hips, they're breathing heavily, every receiver is blanketed. You literally cannot play better coverage than that." And yet, Drake Maye's singular talent would be showcased. Sensing the pressure, he abandons the pocket and scrambles for a significant gain. You will require those moments. You will absolutely need those sequences, in my estimation. The second answer for achieving this disruptive effect is to similarly unsettle Sam Darnold. The objective is fundamentally to make him ill at ease, to sow seeds of doubt, and most crucially, to make Sam so thoroughly uncomfortable that you thereby force the entire Seahawks organization to second-guess their intended game plan. Again, you want to create a scenario where the television commentators are stating, "Goodness, offensive coordinator Kubiak has no idea what to call at this juncture because nothing is functioning correctly, or Sam is completely out of rhythm." Whatever the specific phrasing may be. If you hear both of those themes, Maye's scrambling causing havoc and Darnold's palpable discomfort, repeated on the broadcast, you know your team is executing effectively. You know you have positioned yourself legitimately to claim the Lombardi Trophy. That is the lens through which I view this matchup. Those are my two paramount focal points, the most significant catalysts for a New England Patriots triumph. Drake Maye leveraging his athleticism to become a monumental disruptive agent, frankly, to such an extent that he challenges Jalen Hurts' Super Bowl rushing record, and defensively, rendering Sam Darnold profoundly uneasy. Defensively, it transcends merely sacking Sam Darnold or generating occasional pressure. It is about manufacturing discomfort. It is about forcing erroneous decisions, precipitating errant throws. It isn't exclusively about generating turnovers, though those are obviously coveted. Of course, you desire interceptions, pick sixes, you want to take the ball away every single play. That's self-evident. But it's even more foundational than that. You simply need to create a sufficient number of situations where you exclaim, "My goodness, Sam cannot afford to make that throw," or "What was he thinking? He was extraordinarily fortunate there." Even a solitary moment like that carries immense weight because it immediately amplifies the pressure, primarily on Sam Darnold, but subsequently on the coaching staff, on Kubiak, fostering a sense of unease. They begin to think, uh-oh. There isn't a long-established, deep-seated trust within that partnership. Kubiak and Darnold have not been a quarterback-coach duo for an extended period. Consequently, there are numerous opportunities to induce that creeping anxiety, making them want to simply resort to handing the ball off immediately. Just give it to the running back. We escape disaster there. And if you are fortunate enough that the Seahawks' luck evaporates and you actually do force a turnover, then circumstances can deteriorate rapidly. Momentum can shift catastrophically fast in a Super Bowl. It truly can. We have witnessed this phenomenon recur repeatedly. This is precisely why figures like Patrick Mahomes and, for that matter, Jalen Hurts, who both committed turnovers in their Super Bowl appearances, found themselves constrained. Obviously, in Mahomes' most recent Super Bowl, the situation spiraled, though my interpretation wasn't that he personally was unraveling. But things do unravel. They absolutely do. Every individual begins to feel that tension. Players tighten up. The coaching staff becomes increasingly apprehensive. You can palpably sense it in the atmosphere. This is one of the most observable dynamics, and it constitutes a particularly fascinating subplot of this specific Super Bowl, as it features two franchises relatively new to this stage, with largely new coaching leadership in this context. I am aware of the historical overlap involving the Raiders and figures like Josh McDaniels, but it feels distinct. Even Josh McDaniels himself, while he has Super Bowl experience, it was not accrued alongside Bill Belichick and Tom Brady. It's a qualitatively different experience. Let us be candid about that. You consistently hear this refrain from athletes who have participated in multiple Super Bowls, describing how profoundly dissimilar the sensation was during their initial appearance compared to their second or third. There exists a divergent energy, an altered comprehension, a distinct tier of composure and self-assurance that the overwhelming majority of these teams and players simply do not possess. There are exceptions, like Milton Williams, and Josh McDaniels has that experience, and Raheem Morris as a player certainly does, but it remains a subtle yet tangible difference. It is undoubtedly a more advantageous position than the one occupied by Kubiak or Darnold. A player like Cooper Kupp has been there and won Super Bowl MVP, but his role is different now. He is not the unequivocal focal point of that offense, though he remains vital and can provide leadership. It's simply not identical, especially when it is not your quarterback leading the charge. You have a second-year quarterback in Drake Maye. You have a Sam Darnold, whom analysts still struggle to define. Was he merely a product of a dysfunctional situation in New York? Or what is the authentic narrative of his career? If you can discover a method to disrupt that equilibrium and initiate internal questioning on all those fronts, you are in an exceedingly favorable position. To me, that delineates the Patriots' path to victory. That is the blueprint for them to win the Super Bowl. It is authentically through the disruption of Sam Darnold, coupled with Drake Maye's deployment of his rushing ability. I am confident he will be capable of making the necessary throws and plays from the pocket. I have zero apprehension regarding that aspect. I am perfectly at ease with him in that regard. I know he can withstand taking sacks. He has endured them all season. Manini referenced those sack numbers, and it's valid. He played behind a line that allowed pressure all year, and yet here they are. It demonstrably did not negatively derail their season, so I am unconcerned about that. However, I must add this caveat. If any team possesses the capability to make an opponent severely regret surrendering sacks to penalize you for finding yourself behind schedule, it is the Seattle Seahawks. Therefore, the strategy isn't exclusively about evading sacks altogether, though naturally, that is preferable. That goes without saying. But it's not as if you cannot afford a single sack in this game. Rather, you must counterpunch. You must make them regret it. In many respects, on a down and distance like 3rd and 12 or 2nd and 12, I would find it far more crippling for the Seahawks if Drake Maye then uses his legs to convert that first down or to transform it into a 3rd and 1. Imagine a scenario. It's 2nd and 15, and after a play, you're aiming to force a 3rd and long, but due to a Maye scramble, it's now 3rd and 2. Even a development like that proves devastating. It contributes to that overarching theme of disruption and frustration, which, as I stated, carries profound consequences in manners analogous to those previously discussed. That is essentially the perspective, the specific vantage point, through which I am evaluating the potential pathway for the New England Patriots. However, I also believe the Patriots occupy an intriguing position here, as I sense many prognosticators are selecting the Seahawks. Considerable confidence is being placed in the Seattle Seahawks, permitting the Patriots to inhabit this role of the doubted, somewhat unknown entity. There is immense enthusiasm for Drake Maye. The media is undoubtedly invested in Drake Maye becoming the next premier quarterback. It is more beneficial for the league's ecosystem. It is more advantageous for all stakeholders when another transcendent quarterback emerges. It has been unfortunate that a talent like Joe Burrow, as magnificent as he is, has been hampered by injuries and playoff absences in a market like Cincinnati. That is suboptimal for the broader business of the league. The football universe desires Drake Maye to be exceptional. They want him to excel. Yet, he remains an unknown quantity on this specific stage, despite being a legitimate MVP contender, who from my vantage point should have secured the award over Matthew Stafford, though that is a separate debate. The uncertainty persists. How does one perform under the Super Bowl's unique glare? I disregard what transpired in the divisional round, the wild card round, or the AFC Championship. None of that is germane now. The sole relevant question is, how do you perform in the Super Bowl? The Super Bowl is an entity unto itself. It is not a conference championship. It is not a divisional playoff. This is the Super Bowl. You feel it viscerally. You sense it in your core. I have observed Drake Maye commit an error, fumble the football, throw an interception, and subsequently overcome it with apparent nonchalance. He must be able to replicate that resilience in the Super Bowl, or, preferably, avoid those mistakes entirely. Consequently, I am tremendously eager to witness how Drake Maye, as an individual, performs. I must confess, I typically endeavor not to view contests strictly through a quarterback versus quarterback prism. That was even my approach for the Washington Commanders, or rather, the Seattle Seahawks and Los Angeles Rams matchup preceding this. I was considerably more intrigued by the coaching chess match, excited to observe what strategies Mike McDonald devised for Sean McVay's Rams offense. That was my primary interest. I wasn't primarily focused on Sam Darnold versus Matthew Stafford. That ultimately proved to be an exhilarating subplot, but it wasn't my central point of anticipation. For this Super Bowl, however, I find myself very much analyzing it through the lenses of Drake Maye and Sam Darnold. How on earth will Sam Darnold perform in a Super Bowl? How on earth will Drake Maye perform in this Super Bowl? I am genuinely fascinated because we have witnessed such a vast spectrum of quarterback performances on this stage over the years. This is why I hold such profound admiration for Jalen Hurts' performances in multiple Super Bowls. I find them quite remarkable, iconic, and awesome. They are, by definition, historic. Is there a potential for a similarly bona fide, legendary performance from either Sam Darnold or Drake Maye? We haven't quite seen that from Joe Burrow on this stage, and I would argue we haven't truly witnessed it from Patrick Mahomes either. Not to suggest he has played poorly, but I don't believe we've seen him completely dominate from inception to conclusion in a Super Bowl. Matthew Stafford authored some magnificent moments and throws, yet I am uncertain if that defined his entire game. He didn't even win MVP. Tom Brady, I suppose, to a degree, in his Super Bowl against the Chiefs while with Tampa, though that game became so lopsided. When a quarterback excels in a contest that feels somewhat atypical, it registers differently for me. Also, given that Brady is a pure pocket passer, his brilliance manifests differently than, say, Jalen Hurts, leveraging his legs and dominating the ground game. Drake Maye possesses that dual threat capability. That is precisely why I suggested the possibility of challenging Hurts' rushing record. I believe that must be a feasible outcome for Drake Maye to secure this victory. The potential for that exists. Therefore, that is genuinely what I am most eager to observe. I cannot definitively choose one quarterback's performance over the other, but the central question is, how does Sam Darnold play in this Super Bowl? How does Drake Maye play in this Super Bowl? That is my primary focus. It is somewhat amusing, as last year's Super Bowl had me fixated on the defensive coordinator matchup between Fangio and Kellen Moore, because I felt I understood the tendencies of Andy Reid and Steve Spagnuolo. My attention wasn't primarily on Hurts or the skill players. This year, I am focused on what Drake Maye and Sam Darnold have in reserve. What will be the caliber of their play, the quality of their decision-making, their resilience, their capacity to confront adversity, to throw an interception or lose a fumble, and to respond with a mentality of, no problem, let's move on. That is what most captivates me heading into this Super Bowl. Those are my perspectives. I would be delighted to hear yours. What are your thoughts regarding Drake Maye and the New England Patriots? How do you perceive their most viable route to victory? Please share your opinions in the commentary section. I read every single comment. Whether you concur with my assessment or vehemently disagree, let's engage in some dialogue, let's have some spirited debates, but ultimately, let's simply enjoy the discussion. Please consider subscribing to the channel. We are cultivating a fantastic community here, and I would be thrilled to have you join it. My ambition is to foster a collective that feels interconnected, something we are genuinely enthusiastic about being a part of. I believe we are making significant progress toward that objective. Also, please remember to give this video a thumbs up, as it substantially assists with visibility and the platform's algorithm. Thank you immensely for your time. I will see you in the next video.